Jung once said the human soul doesn't heal by escaping pain, but by understanding what the pain is trying to become. For highly sensitive people, that statement is both prophecy and challenge. Their emotional depth can be the birthplace of wisdom or the breeding ground of suffering. Jung realized that empathy left unconscious corrodes, but when it becomes conscious, it turns into power. He called it individuation, the process of becoming a whole being, no longer ruled by fragments of pain or borrowed emotions. Among all archetypes, Jung found the empath to be the most unstable, both healer and hostage. Their gift is the ability to feel what others can't. Their curse, the inability to stop. Every empath stands at a fork in the psyche, remain the wounded vessel or forge into the warrior who understands. His realization came during a case that haunted him for years. A woman who could intuit anyone's suffering within minutes, yet collapsed when asked about her own. She wept for strangers, but mocked her own tears. Her insight unmatched. Her self-awareness non-existent. Jung saw that she treated her wound as sacred a relic that validated her existence. Without it, she feared she'd be invisible. He called this identification with the wound and recognized it as the silent epidemic among the sensitive. He wrote that many empaths believe their worth depends on remaining broken. Pain becomes a credential. Trauma becomes proof of authenticity. When you build your identity on suffering, healing feels like erasure. Jung saw that this paradox, the fear of losing one's specialness, keeps people trapped. They talk about growth, but secretly worship pain. Healing becomes betrayal of the self they've built around injury. The first mechanism he observed was what he called moral dissociation. The empath separates themselves from their shadow. They claim only goodness. Every dark impulse, anger, envy, the desire to dominate is pushed outward, projected onto others. They begin to curate purity, a personality of endless patience and gentleness. Jung called it dangerous innocence. Without conscious access to your own aggression, you cannot protect your boundaries. Without acknowledging selfishness, you cannot assert needs. The unintegrated empath becomes prey, not because of lack of strength, but because of lack of shadow. The second mechanism was what he termed suffering economy. In social ecosystems, pain trades for attention. The empath who bleeds loudest receives validation. The more tragic the story, the greater the sympathy. Jung noted that modern culture quietly rewards victimhood. Pity becomes a social currency, and the empath unconsciously invests. They become fluent in narratives of loss because those stories guarantee connection. Healing, therefore, feels like poverty. When the pain subsides, so does the audience. Third, identity inertia. The psyche resists transformation because change equals death. If your emotional life, friendships, and sense of meaning all orbit your wound, wholeness feels like extinction. Jung found this particularly true for healers and artists. They fear that peace will dull their sensitivity, that happiness will ruin their art. Yet every authentic creation, he argued, comes from integration, not fragmentation. From these patterns, Jung mapped the descent and ascent of the empath in 5 stages. Stage 1, the absorber. Life feels like static electricity. Every emotion clings to you. You enter rooms and immediately sense tension, sadness, resentment. You think it's intuition. Often it's just porous boundaries. You confuse awareness with responsibility. If someone suffers, you assume it's your job to fix it. You apologize for things you didn't cause. You startle at anger, absorb blame, and call it compassion. Stage 2, the healer of others. You discover you can soothe people. They trust you, confide in you, depend on you. You find purpose in their pain and relief in their gratitude. You become indispensable but also invisible. Your relationships orbit around what you give, not who you are. Jung noted that this stage can last decades. It feels noble, even spiritual. But service without selfhood breeds quiet resentment. Stage 3, the crisis. The empath burns out. They sense the imbalance but can't explain it. They feel guilty for wanting rest. The nervous system begins to revolt, anxiety, exhaustion, emotional numbness. Jung compared it to psychic anemia, the soul's iron depleted by endless bleeding. This stage ends in collapse or awakening. Some retreat into bitterness, calling sensitivity a curse. Others begin to suspect that the real work isn't helping others but meeting themselves. Stage 4, the integration. Here the empath meets their shadow. They realize empathy without boundaries is not love. It's leakage. They start naming the suppressed feelings, anger, pride, desire. At first, the honesty feels dangerous. They fear becoming like the people who once hurt them. But slowly they see the truth: you can hold power without harming. The shadow once owned transforms from enemy to ally. Jung called this reclaiming the disowned self. Stage 5, the warrior. Strength and sensitivity merge. Compassion stops draining and starts directing. The empath no longer absorbs chaos, they sense it, interpret it, decide their involvement. They develop what Jung called conscious empathy, feeling deeply while remaining grounded. They protect their energy without guilt, speak truth without cruelty, love without losing themselves. This is not the end of empathy, it's its evolution. Jung warned that between stages 3 and 4 lies the valley of dissolution. Here, everything familiar unravels. Old roles die. Relationships shift. The empath begins saying no and people recoil. The more they reclaim selfhood, the more others accuse them of selfishness. Jung saw this backlash as proof of progress. Systems organized around your self-sacrifice will not applaud your freedom. They will resist. Integration exposes the unconscious dynamics others depend on. He noted 3 primary dangers during transformation. The first, collapse into despair. When meaning structures dissolve, the psyche panics. You feel empty, faithless, disoriented. Jung called it the death phase of the old self. He urged patience. The void is not punishment, it's preparation. Out of the emptiness, new identity emerges. The second, inflation. Once the empath gains self-awareness, they may overcorrect. From martyr to missionary, from silence to sermon. They preach boundaries as dogma, mistake assertiveness for superiority. Jung cautioned that inflation is the ego's rebellion against humility. Real power doesn't need display. The third, bypass. Avoiding depth through spiritual distraction. The empath, terrified of anger or grief, rushes into transcendence, meditation rituals, philosophies promising immediate light. Jung called it false ascent. True individuation descends before it rises. You cannot transcend what you refuse to touch. He proposed 4 disciplines for navigating this terrain. 1, conscious shadow work. Keep a list of judgments. Each accusation reveals projection. When you say they're manipulative, ask, where do I manipulate, not to shame yourself, but to reclaim choice. The shadow becomes guidance when faced with curiosity instead of denial. 2, emotional differentiation. Each morning, identify what feelings are yours. If your mood shifts suddenly in public, pause. Ask whose emotion is this. Most empaths live as open receivers. Jung's method trains discernment. Awareness filters the influx. 3, boundary embodiment. Boundaries are not words, they are nervous system responses. Practice stillness when pressured. Notice the urge to explain, to appease. Do nothing. That pause rewires your energy field. Others sense it before you speak. 4. Authentic assertion. The empath must learn direct expression. Say, "I'm not available right now," without apology. Express needs as facts, not negotiations. Jung believed every unspoken truth becomes shadow material. The more you silence yourself, the more your unconscious speaks through fatigue or illness. He documented striking transformations when empaths adopted these practices. Their posture changed. Their tone deepened. They laughed without guilt. They no longer needed chaos to feel alive. People who once drained them began to retreat, confused by the loss of access. Jung said the psyche reorganizes reality around inner clarity. When you integrate, your outer world follows. But he also noted the loneliness of transition. Integration isolates. The empath, accustomed to approval, feels the silence of withdrawal. Jung compared it to spiritual winter, the stillness before regeneration. Many mistake it for failure and return to old roles. Those who endure the quiet emerge unrecognizable. They don't glow with positivity, they emanate presence. The difference is subtle but seismic. He described the integrated empath as emotionally bilingual. They understand both suffering and serenity, can navigate both without drowning. They know when compassion helps and when it enables. They can sit beside chaos without internalizing it. This equilibrium, Jung said, is the rarest psychological state, a heart that feels everything and a mind that remains still. He urged empaths to remember compassion without clarity is self-destruction. Every empathic act must be rooted in self-awareness. Otherwise, it's just projection in disguise. The warrior empath doesn't rescue people from pain. They stand beside them in truth. They offer presence, not escape. They listen without absorbing, guide without dictating. Jung saw in these individuals the prototype for a new human maturity. Civilization, he believed, would evolve only when sensitivity and strength coexist. For too long, society glorified dominance and mocked feeling. The empath's rise signals correction. Conscious empathy awareness joined with courage is the next step of evolution. The warrior empath doesn't fight against darkness. They integrate it, showing the collective that light becomes sterile without shadow. Still, he warned, no transformation stays permanent without maintenance. The psyche is dynamic. Shadow material regenerates. The empath must continue practices, reflection, solitude, boundary renewal. Growth is cyclical, not linear. Integration is not graduation, but discipline. Each confrontation with pain offers new layers of wholeness. When Jung summarized his findings, he said the goal isn't to escape suffering, but to metabolize it. Pain transforms when given meaning. The empath's greatest task is not to avoid sensitivity, but to wield it consciously. That means choosing when to feel, when to release, when to rest. Sensitivity then becomes precision. You stop reacting, you start responding. He ended one lecture by saying, "The soul grows not by sunshine alone, but by the light that knows darkness." For the empath, that sentence is a map. Every wound you integrate expands your capacity for light. Every shadow you own sharpens your empathy. You do not lose your softness. You gain structure. You become the rarest kind of being, gentle yet unyielding. To walk this path is to carry paradox, open heart, firm spine. To feel without falling. To serve without surrendering self. Jung called this the final stage of individuation, wholeness, achieved through conscious balance. He believed such individuals would quietly alter the human story, teaching by example that empathy, when integrated, is not weakness at all, it's evolution in motion. When the empath reaches integration, the entire landscape of their relationships changes. Jung described it as psychological reordering. People who once depended on your emotional labor start feeling exposed. Their projections no longer stick. The energy exchange reverses. What used to drain now clarifies. Those accustomed to your endless availability might label your calm as coldness. They don't realize that presence without performance is what true love looks like. Jung called this the loneliness of authenticity, the quiet that follows when validation no longer dictates behavior. He taught that this phase tests commitment to the new self. The empath learns to endure misunderstanding without collapsing into apology. They discover that explanation is often just disguised fear. Silence, when conscious, becomes protection. Jung advised his students to view silence as the boundary language of the mature psyche. You don't need everyone to understand you. You need to understand yourself in everyone's presence. To remain centered, he encouraged what he called psychic hygiene, small daily disciplines that keep consciousness sharp. Start each day by noticing the first thought that appears. Is it gratitude or guilt? At night, replay the day backward and release any energy that doesn't belong to you. He said awareness of small details accumulates into strength. You don't conquer shadow once you outgrow it, moment by moment. Jung saw empaths as barometers of collective unconsciousness. They pick up what society denies. When integrated, they become translators, not victims. They articulate the hidden emotional truth that others sense but cannot express. In this way, the warrior empath becomes a cultural necessity. Their sensitivity guides evolution, turning collective pain into collective insight. But only if they remain grounded. If they slip back into identification with pain, they lose perspective and become amplifiers of chaos instead of interpreters of it. He documented patterns of relapse. The empath who re-enters toxic relationships out of nostalgia for old identity. The healer who overextends until exhaustion returns. The artist who equates suffering with creativity and sabotages peace. Jung warned that regression feels familiar, and familiarity often masquerades as belonging. The antidote is awareness, remembering that comfort built on pain is not safety, but sedation. He defined 3 markers of sustained transformation. First, emotional proportionality. The intensity of reaction matches reality. No more flooding or dissociation. Second, relational reciprocity. Giving and receiving balance naturally without resentment. Third, existential steadiness. A quiet sense that you can survive truth, whatever it reveals. When these 3 stabilize, individuation becomes embodiment. In his final writings, Jung hinted that the integrated empath carries a subtle radiance. Not a glow of perfection, but of coherence. He compared it to gold, dense, grounded, incorruptible. This is the alchemical completion, turning the lead of pain into the gold of wisdom. Such people, he said, rarely speak about enlightenment. They live it in the tone of their voice, the steadiness of their eyes, the calm in their presence. They listen without absorption, act without aggression, and love without losing themselves. He described 4 societal roles these individuals naturally fill. The stabilizer, bringing order to emotional chaos. The translator, putting feeling into language that educates. The mirror, reflecting unconscious patterns without judgment. And the bridge, connecting rational and emotional worlds. Together, these roles shape the empath's larger mission to model wholeness for a fragmented culture. Jung knew that integrated empaths face a final temptation: superiority. After enduring the crucible of shadow work, it's easy to see oneself as more evolved. But he reminded that humility is the last gate before wisdom. The moment you believe you are beyond shadow, the shadow owns you again. True mastery is self-forgetfulness, the absence of performance, the presence of purpose. He also believed that the empath's evolution contributes directly to human progress. Every act of integration adds coherence to the collective psyche. When one person learns to hold pain consciously, the field of unconscious suffering decreases. He called this psychological ecology. Each healed empath becomes an ecosystem of stability, reducing the world's emotional pollution. Healing yourself is never selfish. It's civic service at the level of soul. To sustain this ecology, Jung recommended alternating solitude and service. Solitude renews awareness. Service grounds it in compassion. Too much isolation hardens empathy. Too much giving dissolves it. Balance is the discipline. Integrated empaths become custodians of equilibrium, reminding the world that sensitivity needs structure and strength needs softness. He once told a student, "Your task is not to feel less, but to feel rightly." That sentence defines the warrior empath's creed. Feeling rightly means discernment, knowing when emotion is information and when it's invasion. It means recognizing that compassion for others begins with compassion for oneself. It means ending the war between heart and boundary. Over time, the empath learns to witness emotion the way a mountain witnesses weather-aware, unmoved. Storms pass, but the mountain remains. This constancy is not detachment, it's depth. Jung said the mature soul is like deep water still at the surface, alive with unseen currents below. The warrior empath carries that stillness into every interaction. Their calm disarms aggression. Their clarity dissolves confusion. Their empathy no longer invites exploitation, it invites evolution. He noted that even collective systems respond to this frequency. Families grow more honest, workplaces less toxic, communities more compassionate. The integrated empath doesn't change people by convincing them, but by embodying coherence so powerfully that incoherence adjusts itself. This is influence without manipulation, leadership without demand. Jung believed this pattern would shape the future of humanity. As the world grows more complex and emotionally charged, sensitivity without consciousness will collapse under overstimulation. Only conscious empaths, those who have integrated their shadows, will navigate chaos without losing integrity. They will become the new stabilizers of civilization, feeling deeply, thinking clearly, acting wisely. He saw individuation not as luxury, but as survival skill. To know your own psyche is to prevent collective madness. The empath's task, therefore, is sacred: to evolve feeling into awareness, awareness into action, and action into example. When enough individuals do this, culture itself transforms. The age of domination gives way to the age of integration. In the closing notes of his journal, Jung wrote, "Wholeness is not the absence of wound, but the place where the wound no longer controls." The empath who lives that truth becomes unshakable. They still cry, still care, still ache, but none of it defines them. Emotion becomes experience, not identity. They walk through darkness, carrying a lantern powered by everything they once feared. From wounded to warrior, the journey is not linear but spiral. Each turn revisits old pain from higher ground. What once triggered now teaches. What once drained now directs. Sensitivity, finally disciplined, becomes strength that needs no defense. Jung saw in that balance the future human, compassionate yet composed, feeling yet free. If you sense that evolution stirring in you, if you're tired of mistaking suffering for depth, if you're ready to integrate rather than endure, take this as confirmation: the transformation has already begun. Every boundary you set honors it. Every truth you speak expands it. Every moment you choose awareness over reaction moves you closer to wholeness. The wound was never the enemy. It was the initiation. The pain was never proof of weakness. It was the training ground for consciousness. The empath's rise is unstoppable because it follows the psyche's natural direction toward completion, toward light that understands shadow. When you can feel everything, yet remain centered, when you can love without losing, when you can serve without bleeding, you have crossed the threshold Jung devoted his life to describing. You have turned empathy into mastery. Say it quietly so your soul hears it first. I am not my wound. I am what healed from it. And healing once conscious never stops. Stay awake. Stay whole. See you in the next dimension.